when we take a look at choices, what to choose and what not to choose, we need to figure out the question of how do people make choices. And anytime they're faced with a choice, they have to make a trade-off. Because you have limited resources and you have scarcity and you have different incentives, if you choose one thing, you're giving up the other thing. So say you have $100 and you decide that's got to go towards food and that's going to feed you for the entire month. Well, then you don't have any money for anything else. That whole $100 has to go to food. So there's no chance to go on any trips, to buy anything like clothes, or go to the store for anything else. There's really no other options. You've got one. And the thing is, if you decide to buy some more clothes, you've got to buy some more clothes for work or something like that, then you're losing money that you could spend on food. You're going to have to go without a meal or two. You're going to have to find a way to make that work, because reality is you've got a fixed amount of money, that $100, and it's got to make it for the entire month. That's what's going to feed you. So if you go out and buy something else, now you've made a trade-off. You've traded your money for food, and you've gotten more of something else, but you've gotten less food. And so that's what we call a trade-off. Anytime you pick one thing and you lose the other, you've traded something off for the other thing. When people make decisions, they do something called a cost-benefit analysis. You could think of this as the thing, hopefully you did this in elementary school and middle school, where your teacher would have you list like the pros and the cons of something. What's the good side and the bad side. Only what humans do is they do a cost-benefit analysis in their minds every minute of every day. In fact, every second you are constantly moving a cost-benefit analysis. Like, how long should I watch this video before it just isn't worth it? Should I get up right now and get some food instead? Those are the kind of things that is a constant cost-benefit analysis. Am I going to be able to get the things I want that make me the happiest? How can I measure what is this going to cost me versus the benefit? And some people will make that decision. So when the policeman says, why were you speeding down the road? You can say, well, I did a cost-benefit analysis and the odds were that you probably weren't going to be here, and so I just sped. And the officer will probably laugh, and you might still get a ticket. But that's what everyone is doing. This is why they do what they do. They do a cost-benefit analysis. They think, how much is this going to help me? How much is this going to hurt me? Is it worth it? They decide it is or it isn't, and that's how they make decisions. And these things are happening in milliseconds all the time. It's amazing. The human brain can just continually be updating itself on how is this going to help me? How is this thing right now that I'm doing going to help me? So that is a cost-benefit analysis, and we are constantly making those choices. What you need to understand too then is that making a choice for one thing is the same as not choosing something else. This comes up all the time in politics, because what a politician will say is, hey, I came up with this new program and it gives us an extra $10 million in some program. And that program gets an extra $10 million. Woo, I'm an amazing politician because I gave $10 million to whatever it is that I'm promoting at this time. Out here on the highway, you see a sign that says $4 million were spent on this project improving Oregon state roads. Well, that doesn't mean we're $4 million wealthier. That doesn't mean that somehow $10 million of benefit just accrued to our country, because for that $10 million benefit here, somewhere else had to lose $10 million. All right? So yeah, that program got more, and if that's your value, hey, you might like that. But over here somewhere else, $10 million did not happen. It got taken away somewhere else. This is a funny story. I had a person come to my door, and they said, do you want to sign a petition that stops logging around Crater Lake? And I said, why would you want to do that? And they said, well, because I love trees and I don't want anyone cutting down trees around Crater Lake outside of the national parks, in the national forests around it. I said, well, you really must not like the local people there. You're going to put those people out of business who work in the mills down there and who work in the lumber industry. You must really not like them. And the guy was shocked. He was like, well, I don't hate them. And I said, oh, it kind of seems like you do, because you want to put them out of business. And he's like, well, I don't want to put them out of business. And he said, well, then you got to cut the trees. And but I love the trees. I don't want to cut the trees. I said, well, then you got to put the lumber mills out of business. You have to put those people on unemployment, and you can't have them cutting those trees if you want the trees. If you want to keep them employed, then you got to cut those trees. And the guy dropped his clipboard on my front porch and he just threw it down and he walked off. I shrugged and went back to watching Monday Night Football. Okay? So this is the problem, is that he was imagining if I just save the trees that somehow that's on net positive and there's no cost to it. See, this is a cost benefit analysis. So anytime you choose one thing, you're making a choice against some other thing. And in fact, in economics, we find that when you choose one thing, you're actually choosing against all the other choices. Everything else is now off the list because you chose this one thing. So it better be the most important thing to you. Otherwise, you're not being very rational about how you choose it. And that's why we study these things. We want to see rational behaviors. We want to see rational decision making. So if you want to make your life a little better, understand that when you make a choice, you're also choosing against all those other things. And when a politician spends your money for something, he's not spending it on all those other things. So remember, anytime you make a choice, you're choosing against all those others. Make it your best choice.